right, so last time, well, first, any questions? Does anybody have any questions from last time? No, not too bad, right? Oh, one, yep. Okay, we'll have to catch up probably a little bit later. Okay. Okay, so we talked about the interface of AutoCAD, right, and kind of how things work. I'll just take about 5 minutes here, and I'm just going to breeze over what we talked about, essentially, right, and just kind of remind you where we've been before we move forward. We open up to our welcome screen here, of course. We can open our drawings over here. Here are our recent documents. So I'm going to click on Start Drawing to start a brand new blank drawing. Okay. When we get to our actual AutoCAD interface, right, we have this black background here. This is called model space, and model space is where we draw, right? Model space is, when we draw in model space, we draw in real world scale. So when we have objects that we're drawing, we draw them exactly the size that they are, okay? Makes things pretty easy. Down here we have a couple of tabs. If I click on a tab, I am popped into paper space. Paper space is where we print. So model space, click, is where we draw, and paper space is where we print, okay? I can still, when I click over here to layout, I can still see, let me just draw something real quick. I can still see objects that I draw in paper space, or objects that I've drawn in model space I can see in paper space, right? And we'll talk about how that connection works probably in a few weeks, okay? All right, we have our quick access menu up here. We talked about that. We have our application menu up here, right? That has all of our systems type operations. We have our ribbon down here, okay? And that's where all of our commands are located, all right? One pretty important thing that I want to reiterate that we talked about last time was units in AutoCAD, right? We are in feet and inches, and the default unit in AutoCAD is the inch, right? So when I input a command and I input a dimension, if I just type 6 and hit enter, it's going to think that that is 6 inches. It's going to assume that that's 6 inches, okay? We have our object snap toolbar down here, right? Object snaps are drawing aids. They help us create geometry, and they help us create precise geometry. So lines that are straight, dimensions that are correct, angles that are correct, okay? If you, maybe to make your life a tiny bit easier, why don't you all right now open up AutoCAD, and if you click on these 3 little lines right here, we get this dialog box that pops up. And this will allow us to customize the object snaps that are down here, okay? So just make sure yours essentially looks like mine. Coordinates, model space grid, snap mode, dynamic input, ortho, polar tracking, object snap tracking, 2D object snap, auto scale, annotation scale, workspace, we'll turn that off. Workspace switching, annotation scale, we'll turn that off. Isolate objects, we'll turn that off. Okay, so this is kind of how we want it to look. Okay. Let's give you a couple minutes. I'll keep talking while we're working here. Another thing I want to remind you of is we have a command line down here, right? And at our command line, just stepping back a little, we have a couple of different ways we can input commands in AutoCAD, right? One of them is the command line. So I can type commands at the command line, hit enter, and that initiates the command, right? I can also come up here to the ribbon view, and I can click on an icon that will also initiate a command, and I can proceed with it. I can also go through the file menus up here, and I can browse through those and find a command and initiate the command through there. Morning. Okay, does everybody sort of have their menus customized here? Okay, I'm gonna hit escape. Now I'm just gonna click on the line icon. You'll notice that when I draw, right, I've got some little green lines happening, and I have kind of that green endpoint snap happening. We'll talk about those a little bit later, but you notice I don't have a lot of things connected with my cursor so far. And if I come down here, there is an icon that says dynamic input. Okay, that's dynamic mode. If I turn that on, which is likely what your model space or your cursor is using, then I get a little bit more things connected to it, right? So I have an angle, I have a dimension associated with it, and I'm seeing more things on the screen, right? Good or bad. Again, that is just a personal preference, right? Dynamic input, if I start typing a command, L-I-N-E, it happens at my cursor, okay? So if you want to have that on, it's perfectly fine. If you don't, then you can turn it off, okay? You'll see me turn mine off. And to turn it off, I'm going to come down here, click on this dynamic input, and it turns off, okay? If these icons are blue, they're turned on. If they are grayed out, they are turned off, right? I'm going to just go through a couple of these again. This first area right here, this shows our drawing coordinates, and this will be important today, right? As I move my cursor around, you notice that the coordinates kind of move and shuffle a bit, right? That is letting me know that where my cursor is located in AutoCAD. AutoCAD is organized around a specific system, which we'll talk about in a second. And when I move my cursor around, you can see exactly where that object is within the model space system, okay? I have this model button right here where I click, and it takes me to paper space, right? We kind of talked about that. If I click on paper space, the viewport is engaged, and I can zoom back and forth and you know, interact with that. If I click on model again, it brings me back. To get back to my model space, I come over here to my model space tab and I click, and I'm back in model space, okay? My grid icon down here, click, grid turns off, grid turns on, right? Just personal preference really how you want this to look. I'll turn mine off. There's a couple. We have the snap mode we're not going to worry about just yet. Dynamic input, whether you want it turned on or off, it's your choice. Ortho, right? When I have my ortho on, you see how even when I'm drawing a line, even when I move my cursor up and down, that line is constrained. This drawing aid ortho allows me to only draw straight up and down, side to side lines, 90-degree angled, right? So I can create a line that is exactly straight in the downward, click, move over, click, but I can't create any angled lines, okay? So you'll see me turning ortho on and off all the time. Another thing you'll want to notice is that next to ortho mode it says F8, right? So if I press F8, click, it turns it off, and you'll notice that my lines are free to move, free to rotate. If I press F8 again, it turns ortho back on, okay? So some quick shortcut keys. I'm going to hit escape to get out, right? Remember, escape is the clear all key. So if you're in any command, basically I would say like 99% of things, if you get stuck in them, press escape and you can get back out, okay? We have our polar tracking, which will identify specific angles that you're drawing, polar tracking, sorry. We have another kind of polar tracking option, which will allow us to snap to objects, and our object snaps here, okay? So a bunch of different object snaps we'll talk about in a bit, all right? We navigate around AutoCAD by using our mouse, essentially. To pan, you know, we've talked about a few of these things, I just wanted to remind you. To pan, I hold my middle button down and I move back and forth, my mouse back and forth, right? To zoom, I put my finger on my middle roller button and I roll it towards the screen and I zoom in. I roll it back and I zoom out. I can pan, I can zoom in, I can zoom out, okay? We have our view cube up here. We're going to kind of probably ignore that for a while. Like I said last time, this view cube will give you views of your model, or not your model, sorry, that was Revit last night. It'll give you views of your model space here. But it pops you into a perspective view, right? So the perspective view, when you're drawing, it may create lines that are not straight, and we don't want that. We want completely straight lines, okay? So there was our class last time in about 5 minutes, right? Any questions about the interface or entering commands or anything like that before we move on? Okay. Another quick thing just to remember is that your your units in AutoCAD are going to be feet and inches, of course, okay? And by default, those are not the units set in AutoCAD. So when we open up a blank drawing, right, we want AutoCAD to recognize our input, right? So when we type in 15 feet, we want AutoCAD to recognize that's 15 feet, not to just disregard it or input something else. And because we are not the only professionals that use AutoCAD, right, we have to set AutoCAD to however we want it to be used, essentially. Okay, so we're going to type at the command line units, hit enter, and when I do that, my drawing units dialog box comes up, and we'll see that we are set to decimal. Okay, this is typically something you'll always want to check. Now before I change this, I'm going to show you. I also know I'm in decimal because my coordinates down here at the bottom that I turned on, they're in decimal. Do you see that? 9.5189, comma 58.1167, right? So I can see those are in decimal format. So that gives me a good hint that AutoCAD as it is right now is set to decimal units, okay? If you're any civil engineers in here? How many civil engineers do we have in here? Okay, so if you're a civil engineer, you will likely work in decimal format here, okay? So this is more of an architectural thing. In this class, we'll go back and forth and do different things just to get you used to decimals and feet and inches. But civil engineers are generally going to be drawing and working in decimals, okay? So here we're going to change this to architectural for today, right? We'll change it back and forth a couple times today, actually, just so we get used to it. Our precision will be 1/32. Okay, decimal degrees, and our precision is going to be 00, okay, 0.00. Now you'll notice down here that my drawing coordinates have changed from decimals to feet and inches, so 8 foot 2 and 7/16, right? And as I move my cursor around and I change position in my model space, you see that my cursor location is changed, okay? All right. And again, we're going to change back and forth between coordinates because what we're doing today is going to require that we do that. All right. Today, I'm going to define kind of the system that AutoCAD uses to organize itself and how that works. And then we're going to start doing some input. Okay. We're going to learn about absolute coordinate input, relative, polar, and direct entry input today. Okay, I think that's all we have on our schedule. Let me just take a look here. Yes, we are looking at our coordinates today. Oh, and probably a couple object snaps. Okay, good. All right, and I want to remind you all, just since I have Canvas up here, I'm going to click on video tutorials here. Okay. There are a ton of videos, and these were created by Jeff Plant, who originally kind of developed this class. But there are a lot of videos here that can probably be pretty helpful to you if you kind of get stuck on something. So, for example, on our lecture on the schedule, we're talking about coordinates, and it'll say something like video number 9, right? So you can go to videos and you can click on absolute coordinates, right? And it pops up with a video. And this video is 3 minutes. So
in this video, we are going to look at how to use absolute coordinates to draw accurately in AutoCAD.
But these are just skills, 3 to 5 minutes usually. Sometimes if it's a big topic, 7 minutes. But they're very helpful. They're really quick, and they can remind you of things that we talked about in class, right? And then also, I want to remind you, just so that if you get lost, right, I post all of our lectures to YouTube, so you can always go there and you can find them if you want to review them, okay? Most of the time I remember to start recording at the beginning of class. Okay, so let's talk about coordinate systems and how our coordinate system is defined in AutoCAD, and how we, yep. Your coordinates are gone? Well, so if you lose your coordinates, did you turn them off, or did you they weren't there? I have no idea what it is. Okay. So if you lose your coordinates, these right here, you're just going to click on this little icon right here, okay? And coordinates is the very top. Come back? Okay. Yep. Okay, so let's talk about, first, before I actually get started, I remembered something we'll review real quick, is selection and deletion of things in your model space, okay? So if we want to select objects, right, you probably remember from last time, I can click and let go of my mouse button, and I can drag a selection window over objects in model space, right? Click again, and I can hit delete on the keyboard and my objects go away, right? When I use a green selection window, anything I touch is selected, okay? If I click down here in the bottom left corner and I move up to the top right, I get a blue selection window. And that blue selection window, anything that is entirely enclosed in that blue window will be selected, okay? So you'll see that I am touching some things, but they're not selecting, right? Even when I click. So I can top right, bottom left, top right, escape, escape to deselect. And I also can touch something and click and pick it, okay? So I'm gonna grab those and hit delete. Yep.
So when I do that, it becomes like this.
It's that's the lasso. It's because you are holding your mouse button down as you move your mouse.
Okay.
If you click and you let go of your mouse button and drag, there's the difference. Yep. And if I want to, a couple other quick things, if I want to undo something I've done, so I deleted all these things and I think, oh great, I didn't want to delete those, okay? I can come up here to my quick access and I can click on undo. I can also redo, okay? I can, yep.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I don't have a command bar.
Oh, you don't? Okay, hold on a second. Let me get that for you. Yes, that brings up another topic I'll talk about too. So I can undo, I can redo. Control Z brings those objects back. Okay, Control Z, and I can also, if I had wanted to use the command line, I could type undo, enter, or sorry, yeah, undo, undo, enter, and it comes back. Okay, so Control Z, I've got undo here, and then I have undo at the command line. Okay, so a couple ways to get things back. Again, some visual things, right? I want your screens to look the same here as they do at home when you're working on your laptop. Makes it really difficult when the program doesn't look the same and you're trying to do your homework. So if your command line goes missing, right, which happens all the time, there is a keyboard shortcut. Hold on, it's okay. It is Control 9. So if I do that, my command line goes away. Control 9, and it comes back. Okay. This command line, obviously it should be there, but Control 9 to get it back. You can also, if you'd like, mine is kind of hovering. It's docked at the bottom, but it's kind of hovering above my control bars down here. I can grab the side of this and drag it down, and I can really dock it across the entire screen if you want to do that. It's kind of the classic way that it you know, back in the good old days of AutoCAD. That's how it was. Another thing that kind of goes missing every now and again are your model layout tabs. There's not a keyboard shortcut that I know of for those. So I'm going to show you how to get those back through the options menu, right? If I type options and I hit enter, and enter is also the space bar in AutoCAD, so I could hit options, space bar, or options, enter. I come in here to the options dialog box, all right? And if I go to the display tab right here, I have display layout and model tabs right here. Okay, and so generally if those have turned off, then this is where you're going to be able to turn them back on. So I unclick that and I hit OK and see they disappear. There must be a keyboard shortcut for them to turn off, because every now and again I toggle mine off too, and I don't, you know, if we looked it up we could find it, but you can turn them on and off here. Okay. Okay. Another thing that sometimes happens is every now and again your ribbon turns off. Uh-oh, right? Panic time. Where are all of my tools? So to get that back, you're going to type ribbon, enter at the command line, and it comes back. And I'll be honest, these are very common things that happen. Ribbon gets turned off, command line gets turned off, tabs get turned off, okay? Another, again, we've talked about this, but another pretty common thing that happens is your file menus when you go home and work on your laptop are gone. They're not there. And by default, I don't believe they are turned on in AutoCAD, but you do need to have them. So to turn those back on, you're going to come up here to your quick access, drop down, and come here to, this is a toggle. Mine says hide menu bar because it's turned on, right? But if I click on hide, mine goes away. If I click on show, then it comes back. Okay. Normally, if I lose something goes away, right? I could type in how to turn command line back on in AutoCAD. Okay, use the shortcut key Control 9. Oh yeah, okay, great, right? So I come back down here and Control 9 and we're good to go, okay? One final thing on how things look in AutoCAD is how these icons show in AutoCAD, right? They can be big buttons like this. They can also be minimized. So there's this little icon right here. If I click on it, you see how my icons look different. Uh-oh, panic time, right? All of the things are still there. I say panic time because I would have panicked, right, when I'm learning this. They're still there, they're just small, right? And so most students suffer through it and they think, oh, I'll just do what I can. But, I just want to show you. If I click again, they get smaller, right? They're still there. You can still use them, but not so easy. I click again and it goes away entirely. I click again and it comes back. Okay, so all visual things, you could make a little list and put it on a post-it, put it next to your computer, make sure the ribbon's on, make sure my file menus are on, make sure my tabs are on, make sure my command line is on, right? Everything's looking good. You should be pretty successful drafting at home. Oh, put there, changed my units to the right units on there. Okay. So let's talk about coordinate input and essentially really how we're going to start drawing in AutoCAD, all right? Before we get to our coordinates, I'm going to select these objects and I'm going to delete them so that we have a clean screen. I'm going to zoom extents and bring my model space back to its full open view. I'm going to notice that down here in the bottom left hand corner of my screen, I have a little X and Y marker, okay? That X and Y marker is called the user coordinate system icon. And essentially that is the 0, 0, 0 point in model space, right? So if we were to organize AutoCAD on a grid system, which it is organized on a grid system, that would be at 0, 0 point, all right? Before we get going on how to enter coordinates, I want to, it looks like most of you have kind of used the line command already, but I want to familiarize you all with the line command, okay? Because to draw something, we have to have a command to draw with. So the line command is going to be the first one that you're going to do. So we can initiate the line command in one of three ways. We can come up here to the icon, and it's under the Home tab, under the Draw menu, and I can click on it. Click, right? By clicking on that icon, I've initiated the command. Now, I know I've initiated the command because I click on it, and when I come down here and I look at the command line, and which is usually the second thing I do in a command, it says specify the first point. So it's giving me instructions on what to do next. And that is going to be very typical of AutoCAD. You initiate a command, you look at the command line tells you what's going to happen next. Okay? So if you get lost in a command, you don't quite know what to do, initiate, then look at the command line. Okay? Now, the command line can also be at your cursor, right? So some instruction could pop up at the cursor if you're using dynamic input. Okay? So specify first point. Well, there's a couple of ways we can specify first points in AutoCAD. I can move into my drawing space, which is model space, and I can click. Click. That specified my first point, all right? Now again, I'm thinking, oh, let me just do something. I don't quite know what to do. Well, let's look at the command line. Specify the next point, okay? So I'm going to specify my next point, and I can do that by clicking. Click. all right? And you'll probably notice that I'm just kind of moving in the direction I want to go, and I click, 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 and I'm just inputting, I'm inputting points, okay? A line in AutoCAD is defined as a start point, an end point, and a midpoint with a direction, right? That's a line. Start point, end point, and it has a direction, okay? All of these lines in AutoCAD have a 0 width associated with them. So, I mean, you see something here, of course, so there's something there, but really they're defined as a 0 width object in AutoCAD, okay? That's a line. Okay. So we have initiated the command, we've specified the first point, right? We've clicked around a few times. That's really kind of the most simplistic way to use a line in AutoCAD, all right? These haven't been, given a specific dimension, which we'll get to in a second, but that's all right. We're just kind of drawing away here, okay? These lines, the line command, it's a continuous command. So when we click, it starts itself over again. It says, hey, continue on, right? Because it assumes that you want to draw more lines in sequence. So essentially it's chaining itself. It's a chained command, all right? So as we draw these lines, we chain, and we're clicking away and drawing lines, okay? All the while, I look down here at my coordinates, and AutoCAD is telling me if I click here, I'm at 1 and 29/30 of an inch by 6 and 25/30 of an inch away from what is my 0, 0 point in model space, this organizational point, okay? Generally speaking, it doesn't matter a ton, but we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, to get out of a command, I'm going to hit escape. Okay, to delete these objects, I'm going to grab my selection window over all of them and hit delete on the keyboard. Okay. All right. A couple more things we're going to talk about before we get into our actual coordinate entry. I'm going to click on line again. Well, let's be crazy. Let's do it through the command line. L-I-N-E, enter. Okay. I've initiated line command, click, move in the direction I want to go, click, click, click. Something you're going to start noticing is, do you see how as I hover about that endpoint of the line, a little green square pops up and I get an endpoint notation, right? So that means that I am at the exact endpoint of that line. And if I want to start drawing another line, if I click, then it will begin at that exact endpoint, right? Or if I continue on, that line that is new will continue on right from this exact endpoint, okay? If I hit escape and I initiate the line command again, okay, and I want to start drawing right from the endpoint of, where this occurs, there's my endpoint, it snaps, right? These are called object snaps. They help me draw. Click. I know I'm right on that endpoint, okay? And what that means is that when I start drawing, that I didn't accidentally miss the corner because it looked like I was at the corner, right? I actually snapped and got to the endpoint of that corner, right? AutoCAD can be quite deceptive, right? And I'll just be honest, people who use AutoCAD, right, engineers, architects, people like that, they really like their lines to be nice and straight and the right dimension and connecting at endpoints, okay? So if you go in and you start working and you're doing things like this, you will definitely be called out on it. So use your object snaps. They're very easy to use, okay? And I say they're very easy to use because they can be turned on all the time, and they only appear when you get near an endpoint or near a midpoint to use them, okay? I'm going to hit escape. Okay, I'm going to kind of get my drawing back in the middle of the screen here. And we're going to talk about a couple of other object snaps, right? I initiate my line command and I hover near, and you see I'm not clicking, I'm just kind of hovering. Oop, my endpoint one is sort of engaging, but that's not the one I want. Ooh, the one I want I don't think is turned on. All right, let's go turn on the one that I want, which is the midpoint snap. And while we're turning it on, I want to show you all of the other midpoint or the other object snaps that we have available. I'm going to come down here to my where all my object snaps are contained. There's this one that it looks like a little square and it has a little arrow next to it, okay? If I click on it, the actual blue part, right, it turns off. So my object snaps will turn off. The shortcut key for that is F3. F3 turns on, F3 turns off. We're going to turn it back on. I'm going to use the drop down, and when I use the drop down, all of my object snaps appear. Okay. Now, when you talk to people who have used AutoCAD for a really long time, they will tell you kind of that, you know, the key to being very fast at AutoCAD is to get to know your keyboard, likely, right? They'll say that. And to use your object snaps appropriately, right? Use object snaps, use your keyboard, and you'll get pretty quick at AutoCAD. Okay, so using object snaps is going to be very helpful for you. If I click on, for example, quadrant, I can turn it on right there. If I click on perpendicular, I can turn it on right there. Okay, if I want to look at all of the object snaps I have available to me, I click on settings. Okay, these are all of the object snaps that are available to me. And you can see that my midpoint is not turned on. So I click, make sure it's turned on. I'm going to turn on nearest as well. Click. I'm going to hit OK. And those are turned on. Now, these are called running object snaps, which means that unless you turn them off, they will always kind of be sensing where these things are on geometry. Okay, so they're always turned on unless you press F3 and you turn them off, which sometimes I do. You'll see me press F3 so that I don't have them appear and I can look at something. F3, turn it back on, right? F3, instead of squinting and going all the way down here to the very bottom corner, finding the icon, clicking on it, you know, anyway. You guys will get used to some of this stuff, right?
So F3 only turns off certain...
It turns off all of them.
Oh, not all of them.
Yep,
Okay.
so it's universal. So if I press F3, every object snap shuts down until I press F3 and turn them back on. Yep. Otherwise they're running and they're automatic. Okay, so let's look at some of these object snaps. I'm going to initiate my line command. I'm going to run my mouse down the line. Do you see how that's a nearest snap? Nearest just allows you to touch the nearest point on a line or geometry. Okay, all of these object snaps will work on any piece of geometry, whether it's a circle, a square, a rectangle, a polygon, it's a wall line, whatever, a block, anything, right? They will snap to endpoint, midpoint, center, nearest, perpendicular on any object. Okay, I drag my mouse down this, and as I approach the center, oh, there's the midpoint, that engages, right? I drag my line down, or my cursor down, there's the endpoint, okay? If I'm drawing a line, click, and I want to get a perpendicular snap. Ooh, let's see if I might not be able to get a perpendicular snap here. Let's do it here. Okay, there's nearest, let's see if I can get there's my perpendicular, right? So that line is exactly from this point to this point, it's perpendicular. Okay, so that's a straight line. Nearest, 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 midpoint, nearest, 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 endpoint. Okay. Now you saw something happen when I was drawing where I said, hey, I want to grab the midpoint, but the midpoint wasn't engaging. Okay, the endpoint engaged. AutoCAD will by default try to sense the most the closest snap, but every now and again, if you're zoomed out or in a weird angle or space next to an object, it will kind of, or if you're in a spot where there's a lot of things very close together, it won't quite know which one you want, and it will just start sensing all over the place, right? And so there is a way where I can force AutoCAD not to sense any object snaps except for one. So generally speaking, every object snap is running, everyone is engaged, right? And it will just kind of automatically sense. There are times when I am close in and I get a lot of object snaps happening, and I think, oh, I just want the endpoint snap, okay? And I can force one snap for one movement by shift, right click, choosing that object snap I want for one movement, like midpoint, and for one movement only, even if I'm near an endpoint, do you see how it only senses that midpoint? Okay, so I click, I engage that midpoint, and now all of my other object snaps come back into play. Okay.
What was that command? Shift what?
Shift right click. Yep, shift right click, and I go to endpoint. And now even though I'm kind of near the center, right, I only get endpoint snaps engaging. I'm not even very close to most of them and they start engaging, right? Okay, I click on that endpoint, shift right click, midpoint, and it only engages midpoints. Click. Now when I, after I've created that, or I've executed that one move, now all of my other object snaps pop up. Okay. Okay, and I'll remind you of these things as we go along, or you'll see me do them, right? So I'm going to hit escape. Okay, object snaps are going to be really helpful for you, right? They help you find that exact point on a line so you don't have lines crossing over one another, not quite reaching one another, not quite at the midpoint, right? They just help you be more precise with your drawing, okay? We've talked about ortho a little bit right here. Ortho will help you create exactly straight lines. So you'll see me turning ortho on and off all the time, right? I come up here, I initiate the line command. I come down here to ortho, click, I turn it on. I click in model space. I move in the direction I want to go, and I start drawing straight lines, right? And you'll notice that wherever I am in model space, that line is straight. It's being constrained, okay? So unless I snap, objects snap to a line, see, even then it's having trouble. It doesn't look like it's going to draw to that corner I'm touching, but it will. Click. Okay, so I kind of have to snap to override that because just by default it won't draw lines that are not straight. Okay, another thing I want to talk about with these object snaps is you can turn them on and off when you're in the middle of a command and it doesn't cancel your command. Okay, so if I press F8, ortho turns off. If I press F8 again, it turns on. My command was maintained. And that is the same for whether or not I use the keyboard or I come down here, click, and come back up here, right? So I can come back here, click, turn those off, come back up, click, click, come down, turn them back on, turn it back on, come back up here, and my command is maintained, okay? So don't be afraid to use them thinking, I finally got line working, it's in the right spot, I don't want to cancel it, I don't even want to risk it, right? So I don't zoom, I don't pan, I don't turn snaps on and off, right? But then it's hard to draw. So, so zoom, you can pan, you can come down, turn snaps on and off, and your command is maintained, okay? I'm going to hit escape here. And I'm going to turn my ortho off and make sure my snaps are on, okay? One more drawing aid until we get going on our coordinate input that will help is polar tracking. So if I click on polar tracking, it turns on. Polar tracking and ortho are somewhat opposites. Ortho constrains only to the 90-degree quadrants of the circle, right? 0, 90, 180, so we can only draw straight lines, okay? Or a polar tracking will allow me to draw straight lines, but at an angle that is specified. So it's not just those 90-degree increments. It can be 15 degrees or 23 degrees or 30 degrees or 18 degrees, whatever I want an angle to be, an angled line to be. This will allow me to do that. So if I click on that down arrow, you'll see that 90, 180, 270, 360 is selected. If I click on 30, 60, 90, right? And I come up and I initiate the line command, click. I click here. You see that green line? Doop, snap. Snap. Snap, right? So this is hitting at 30-degree increments. So if I'm drawing a building and I know that I need a 30-degree angle, right? I would initiate my line command, come down to my polar tracking, make sure the 30, 60, 90 is selected, okay? Click to initiate my line command, and then I would click. There's my 30-degree angle, right? And it snaps. Click, snaps, click, okay? And you can do that for really any angle. I'm gonna hit escape. Any angle meaning we do have some that are preset. So, 5, 10, 15, 20. So I come up here and 5, let's see if we can get it to go. There we go. See, it's hitting at every 5 degree, which is pretty close increments, right? But if I wanted to do some off increment, I could use the drop down, go to tracking settings, and here it says 5, but if I want to create a new angle to track at, right, because you have a building that you're drawing and whoever designed it put a 23.5 degree angle in there, which happens. We're going to click new, 23.5, enter, okay, and now when I use my line, I've got that 23.5 degree angle there, okay. Okay. So we have, and we'll stop there with the object snaps. There's one more drawing aid we'll talk about probably next time, but we'll stop there with all of our object snaps. But just remember, we have our ortho. We're going to F8, turn that on and off as we're drawing lines because we want straight lines in AutoCAD. We have our object snaps, midpoint, endpoint, perpendicular, nearest, right? Those help us achieve drawing lines on certain points or certain places on lines. Yep.
So, without pressing F8, can't you just hold Shift?
No, don't use Shift in AutoCAD. Yeah.
It just turns on ortho by itself when you use it.
Well, Shift, here's the thing with Shift. Shift in AutoCAD, right? So I'm in the line command and I click and I press Shift, right? Which you're in dynamic input, which is a little different. But the problem with Shift is that if I am drawing, so yes, right? I get an ortho. Yeah, right? Did you see that? But the problem with Shift is that if I hold it and I accidentally pan a little bit, it will pop me into 3D. So while that is kind of a good shortcut, it's really kind of could cause more problems than it's worth, right? So maybe when you get a lot better at AutoCAD, you can start using it because you know what will happen if you pop into 3D a little bit, right? But if you even slightly get into 3D where you can't detect it, your lines won't be straight. They won't be straight, they'll be weird dimensions, and you'll be tearing your hair out thinking, why isn't anything straight? I'm doing it right. And you'll get non-coplanar lines. So just for now, you want to stay away from Shift. Okay, I'm going to go back to my top view here. All right, so let me talk about our coordinates here, okay? I'm going to start a brand new drawing, okay? And I did that, started a brand new drawing by clicking on New Drawing right here. When you start a brand new blank drawing in AutoCAD, obviously there's nothing in it. I want to come down here, I'm going to look at this and say, hey, there's my UCS icon, right? That sort of tells me that my point 0, 0 in model space is occurring right there, all right? But let me talk about how AutoCAD is sort of organized. Just ignore you, okay. Ignore the guy behind the curtain. AutoCAD is organized around the Cartesian coordinate system, okay? So you probably remember that from algebra. I don't even remember where it comes from, right? Algebra. But that, yep.
Oh no, I was just saying distance is always positive. So.
Yes, yeah, well, yes. In some cases it's positive, but it can be negative also, right? So the Cartesian coordinate system essentially works like this. We use ordered pairs to locate items on a gridded system, right? And so our point right here, 0, 0, that is our origin, right, in this system, all right? And if I move in this direction, it's the positive x direction, and if I move in this direction, it's the negative x direction. And if I move in this direction, it's going to be the positive y, and if I move in this direction, it's going to be the negative y direction, okay? And when we look at our AutoCAD model space right here, and we have these coordinates right here, you know, when we move our cursor around, it cruises around. That is essentially telling you where in model space using an XY coordinate you are, okay? So if I am, let's do this, 1, 2, 3, and I'm over 2, maybe I'm right there. This means that I'm over 1, 2 in the X direction, and I'm up 1, 2, 3 in the Y direction. So 2, 3, and this is the X, and that is the Y coordinate, all right? So really, other than, you know, you really just for this class have to know what this means, right? You have to kind of understand the theory behind it to know how AutoCAD organizes itself. But after probably this week, where we will learn how to input coordinates according to the system, you really won't necessarily have to pay attention to it anymore, right? Other than, again, today, where we're going to input things according to our origins, just so that you understand how it works. Nobody's really very interested in, hey, start your drawing at point 9764, 3287, right? It doesn't happen. So, you know, again, we're just going to draw, we're going to understand what happens here, but after this week, you know, you're really not going to have to pay attention too much, okay? But this is how AutoCAD organizes itself, right? And I can see that by moving my cursor here. It says I'm at, 9, 10. Over here I'm at -7, 8, right? Here I'm at -5, -5, right? So as I move my mouse into these different quadrants, I do get that reading for that mouse, okay? If I draw a piece of geometry here, and I click on that piece of geometry, okay, I'm going to do something you don't really need to worry about just yet, but I can list this and look at it, and it tells me that object is living in model space, and here is where it's located, right? It goes from here to here, so it starts at 3, 6, and it ends at 18, 13, okay? So, whatever application you're doing, there may be some application in the future where you're saying, hey, where does that start and stop? And maybe that applies to the area or the volume of something, right? And it's helpful. But again, for now, we'll learn how to do it. You will have some exercises on inputting. Yep.
So notice when you open another drawing that it reverted back to all the previous settings. Is there a way to open a new drawing and maintain all the settings from your previous?
There are. It's to create a template. Yes, which we will be doing soon. Yes. But we're not too worried about this. So we'll learn how to input these, and then we'll kind of have it in our mind to understand AutoCAD. Okay. So I'm going to delete this line, and let's talk about how to input some of our coordinates. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we're just going to do 4. 5. We have 5 coordinates we're going to talk about. We have absolute, relative, polar, direct, distance, and dynamic. Okay. Hold on one second. Let me just make sure I haven't forgotten anything here. Okay. Doing well. Okay. Any questions so far? Anything you want me to clear up before we move on? All right. Let me, I don't think I have my files here. I'm just going to pull up something here real quick. Hold on one second. Okay, so I want you all you'll be using these, so just so you know where they are, I'm going to open up a couple of these drawings, and I went to CAD Common. I went to this PC, so I opened up a folder. I went to this PC. I went to CAD Common. Click, click, right? I'm going to go to Arch. This is where all of our class files are, 1310. So if I double click and open that, and then I open up Coordinates, which is this first one right here, Coordinates, we're going to use these files to help us learn coordinates today, okay? But otherwise, usually when I find a drawing file, if I go into Drawings, right, here are all of the kind of class exercise files that I'll be using. So always in the same place. Tutorial videos, you can grab these if you want, right? These aren't private if you want to grab them from here. The files are probably gigantic. But if you want to take them, have them stand alone and be able to use them at home, although they are on Canvas, which makes it easier, right? You can do that. But, things in here are, I would say, generally public. You can go in and grab things. So coordinates, I'm going to open up absolute coordinate system right here, double click, and here we are. Okay, it's a little in-class exercise. Absolute coordinate is a way of drawing lines in AutoCAD using the origin in AutoCAD as a starting point and inputting your line command through the keyboard. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint of one of our next drawing commands, but when I click on line and I click and I initiate the command, and then I move in the direction I want to go, and I click, click, click again. That's what's called a direct entry, and I'm using my mouse to do that, okay? With our coordinate entry, this absolute coordinate entry, I'm going to be using the keyboard to create my lines with paired number input. And it sounds a lot more complicated than it actually is, but it is different than what we've been doing so far. Now, when I input lines, on the screen here using absolute coordinates, the ordered pairs that I am inputting are measured right off of the origin. So absolute means measured from the origin. All right. So let me just show you how we're going to do this. We're going to be using our keyboard for this one, and this is probably, again, not something you're going to do a ton, but you need to know how it works to function in AutoCAD. Usually you're going to be using direct input. You'll use your mouse, initiate the command, click, click, click away, go on drawing. Okay. So for this, we're going to initiate the line command. We're going to do that by typing L, enter, or line, enter at the command line. And when AutoCAD says specify a first point, instead of clicking in model space, we are going to input an ordered pair. So we're going to enter an XY coordinate that tells AutoCAD where this point right here is, which is, if I look there, it's measured from the origin 1, 1. 1, 1, enter. Right? And so by doing that, and let me just say this, if you have your dynamic input turned on, will you turn it off for this? So if you have it on, hit escape, 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 come down here, turn your dynamic input off. It's this one right here. And if you don't see this little icon on your screen down there, you're going to click on this customization and turn this icon on and then turn it off. Okay. All right, so I'm going to initiate the line command, L, enter, and I'm going to type 0, 0, enter. Oh, not 0, 0, sorry. L, enter, 1, 1, enter, and there is my first line. Okay, so in order for me to get from this point right here to this next point here, right, I need to go over from the origin 1, 2, 3, 4 in the X direction and 1 in the Y direction, measured from the origin. Okay, so it says, hey, specify the next point. Well, okay, so that one is going to be in the X direction 4, 1, enter. Right, and the next one is going to be 4 again, but the X in the Y direction, it's 1, 2 up. So 4, 2, enter. Right, and the next one all the way over there to the right is going to be in the X direction over 8. So 8, 1, 2 up. You guys kind of get the idea how this system works, right? I'm going to go, the next one is 2 above that, so that's 8, from the origin 1, 2, 3, 4. So 8, 4, enter. The one over on the top here, this one right here, measured from the origin is going to be over 1, up 4, so it's 1, 4, enter. And then we have, coming back to here is 1, 1, escape. Okay. Now, let me just give you a little preview of what you're going to be doing for your homework so that you can kind of know what to look for. And let me just tell you guys, yep.
Sorry, I keep doing that, but it goes sideways.
It's because your dynamic input's on. Yep.
I tried turning it off too. It's this one, right?
Nope. Dynamic input. So you already have your dynamic input turned on.
Oh, this one.
It's this one right here. Oh, you have to turn it back on. Oh, there you go. Turn that off. There you go. Delete that line and start over. Okay. So your homework will be, oh, I haven't published it yet. Sorry. I will publish it. It's going to be this first one, which is coordinate drawings. I will publish it right after class. And essentially what I'm going to have you do is I'm gonna delete a few of these. I'm gonna have you do, I think I had 5 of these tutorials assigned. So Jeff had you do all, I think there's 11, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, oh, there's 10. He had you do all 10 of these. I'm gonna cut it in half because I just think this is a little excessive. I put some of the pages from the booklet in here so that it's easy to, you can look at the screen to do your homework, but essentially this is what you're going to be doing for your homework. Okay, so you're going to start at 1, 1, you're going to go over to 3, 1, right, and you're just going to work your way around all of these lines, okay, to create these shapes. You can look at this yourself and say, oh, from the origin that's over and up this many, or here he has developed every ordered pair, 1, 6, 3, 6, 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, right? And it makes it pretty easy just to enter these. Okay, So we've got a few of these we're going to have to do. I'm going to get rid of about half of them, but you still will have to do about 5 of these. Okay. Okay. All right, so this is our absolute coordinate, and I'm just going to hurry and do this again just so that everybody can kind of see what is happening. One really common mistake, and it's already happened, right? Make sure your dynamic input's turned off because that will interfere with it, but we'll just hurry and say L for line, enter, 1, 1, enter, and then we'll go 4, 1, enter, and 4, 2, enter. And that one over there is 8, 2, right? And then 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then this one over here is 1, 4. And then we end with 1, 1, right? If I get stuck and I think, oh, great, I get my line and it goes like that, and you're like, oh, great, right? What am I going to do? How do I kind of start back up? Okay, well, you can click and delete that one, and then you can just start by saying, hey, I'm going to start at this last known coordinate. So I'm going to type L for line, enter, 1, 4, enter, and I start back up. Okay, and I can go to 1, 1 and finish it up. All right, so if you happen to get stuck, if you do something wrong, don't panic. Just click on that object, delete it, and start back up where you were, right? If you want to be really tricky and have gotten the hang of AutoCAD a little bit, you could also, if I end up, getting stuck right here, you could initiate the line command to start where you stopped. You could click, right, and just continue on, right? It could be a hybrid, okay? Any questions about absolute coordinates? Not too bad. Yep.
So on the homework, how are we gonna do that? Is there like a page kind of like this?
No, you're going to start a blank drawing.
Okay.
Yep, so what you'll do with your homework is you will start a blank drawing, right? When you start your blank drawing, that means that right now we are in decimal units, okay? These exercises we're doing today are in decimal units, all right? We'll go back and forth between units just so you get used to the idea that you'll have to change, okay? But these are in decimal. You'll start a brand new drawing, essentially, okay? The system is organized in here. We see our origin right there. And what you'll do is you will just really start, let me see if I can split my screen here a little bit. And we'll go back up here. Okay, these are absolute coordinates, and this one is at 1, 1. So I'll come in here and I'll type L for line, enter, 1, 1, enter, right? I can pan to get back where that's at, okay? And then I'm gonna start entering the rest of my commands, okay? And just move all the way around that H in ordered pairs, okay? That make sense? One thing that this is something I need to clarify. When I typed 1, 1, enter, oops, let me do it here. 1, 1, enter. Do you see how my grid right there, it actually, when you're looking at this, it looks like it's over 2, 2. Do you see that? The reason that it looks like that is because this grid that is organizing AutoCAD just graphically in here, okay, it by default is set to half-inch increments. Like Jeff, when he created that exercise we just did in class, he set his background grid to be 1 inch by 1 inch, 1 to 1, so that it would look like over 1, up 1, okay? So don't let this grid back here kind of confuse you. I will show you the grid settings, right? It says 0.5, 0.5. That's why you see 2 squares for 1 increment of movement. So just know that. If you don't like looking at it, just press F7. F7 is the grid, right? Or you can come down here. Here's our grid mode. Click, click, and turn it on and off. Okay. All right, a couple more. We'll get through. We've got about maybe another half hour, maybe 20 minutes if we hurry. Let's talk about relative coordinates. All right. I'm going to open up this relative coordinates exercise here. Okay. So relative coordinates function as far as how we start, initiate, and use the line command exactly the same. However, the measurement between the objects is a little bit different, and the input is a tiny bit different. When I'm using relative input, the input is measured between existing points, right? So when I say I want to draw a line from here to here, I'm not measuring from the origin with a relative input. I'm measuring between points. Okay, so these points, instead of, this one starts at 1, 1, of course, we know that, but between this point and this point, right, instead of measuring off the origin and saying over 4, up 1, I'm going to go in the x direction relative to this last point, 1, 2, 3, comma 0, because it's not moving in the y direction, right? So from this point to that point, which is a relative input, it's going to be 3, comma 0. So I'm measuring between points. All right. Now, AutoCAD needs to know that you are using relative input. So you have to somehow say, instead of just 4, comma 6, right, which could be which is an absolute input, you have to let it know that you're using a relative input instead of an absolute one. And so to do that, you're going to input the @ symbol before your ordered pair. So that's the difference between absolute and relative as far as input, and then the difference between measurement is that it's between points and not between the origin and the object. Okay, something just to remind you, the book, don't forget about your book, because it explains all of this, right? So absolute coordinates are based on the UCS icon 0, 0, and relative coordinates are based on the last point entered, right? So if you mix up the terms, which I very easily can see happening, right? Just go to your book and it will tell you exactly the difference between the two, okay? And relative input is designated with an @ symbol. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start this exercise with an absolute input because it starts at 1, comma 1. So I'm going to type 1, initiate the line command, L, enter, 1, comma 1, enter, and it initiates. Now I need to move to this point. This is a relative input, so I'm measuring between points, and I recognize I have to put an @ symbol. So I type @ and the x direction is 1, 2, 3, 3, comma, there's no movement in the y direction, so 0, enter. And again, make sure that your dynamic input is turned off, because if you don't have it turned off, it will interfere with it, okay? So how do I get to this next one here? Well, I'm going to type in the x direction, I'm not moving, so it's 0, comma, 1 in the y direction, enter, okay? Same here, I'm going to type @ and it's 1, 2, 3, 4 in the x direction, comma 0 in the y. Now this one here is going to be in the x direction, I'm not going any, 0, comma 1, 2, right? And then here I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7, comma 0, or not? Yes, 0 in the y direction. Uh-oh. I did something wrong, right? -7, yes. But it also, it went down weird like that, right? You know what I did? That's exactly it. Yep. I didn't use the @ symbol. So if I don't use the @ symbol, it is going to measure off the origin, right? So it went over from the origin 0, comma 7, right? So it did what it should have. So I think, oh great. I'm gonna start this assignment over, right? No, I'm not really. I'm gonna hit escape. I'm gonna click on that line and hit delete. Okay. I'm gonna reinitiate my line command. I'm just gonna cheat a little. It's not really cheating. I'm gonna click on that last point entered, or you could measure it from the origin, or however you want to get back there. Just get back there, right? And I'm gonna type @ 7, comma 0. Oh. There's the negative, right? So I went over 7, comma 0, and it went in the positive x direction, right? I want to go in the negative x direction. I'm going to undo this one. U, enter. Okay, I'm going to click on line. I'm going to come back over here and click on that point. And I'm going to type @-7, comma 0, enter, and it takes me exactly where I need to go. Okay, I'm going to type we're going to go in the x direction, we're going to go 0, but in the y direction, we're going to go negative 1, 2, 3. And it finishes off there. Okay. You will have some of these absolute inputs, right? This is absolute, and we'll have some relative ones as well, right? So you'll start here, and you'll go all the way around to create these shapes, okay? All right, so absolute measures off the origin, relative measures from point to point, okay? Let's look at polar coordinates. Okay, I'm going to click on polar coordinates here, open that up. Polar coordinates connect points. We can use the command line, but this, instead of creating just straight lines, it creates angled lines as well. Okay, so we have a little bit, again, same idea, just a different, I guess, syntax for your input. Okay, and we're going to input an angle, right? Positive angles go in the counterclockwise direction. Negative angles, right, go in the clockwise direction in AutoCAD. Okay, this will be pretty important when we're doing arcs. But don't worry if you get it the wrong direction, right? Of course, you can always delete it and just do it the other direction. No big deal. So how do we input our polar coordinates? Okay. Generally speaking, polar coordinates are going to be, they're polar, right, which means they have an angle associated with them, but they also have absolute or relative associations, okay? So it can be a polar input, but it's relative to the origin, or it's a polar input, but it is absolute from the last point, okay? So let's talk about how we're going to do these. I'm going to click on line. I'm going to type 0, 0 to start, or not 0, 0. Pay attention to what I'm doing. 1, 1. And I'm going to start at that first point. I'm going to move in this direction, and I'm going to type at 1, 2, 3, 3, 0. So that was an absolute or relative input. And now it's time for me to create this line, and it has an angle to it, all right? And I need to know what that is, so I come over here and I look and I see, oh, it's a 45-degree angle, okay? So I'm going to type the length. Let me give you the way it's going to work. First of all, I have to have an at symbol because this is relative to the last point. So I'm going to type at, and I'm going to type in the length, 1.41. At an angle of, so I just use the little angle, hat symbol, whatever, okay? At an angle of, is it going to be positive 45 or negative 45? Right, we're moving in the clockwise direction, essentially. So if I, yep.
So why did you put 1.41?
Because that is the length of the line right here.
Oh, I see.
You see that? Let's do it both ways, right? So if we type 45 here, we get we get a 45 in the well, it's in the positive direction because we're going from 0 up, right? So 0 up, we're going 45 degrees, right? Now there's a couple of ways you can think about this. It's a little tricky. Let me I'm gonna have to probably do a little math here, right? But if you think about this, and there are gonna be a couple of problems where this happens, right? Where you have an angle that looks like that, and it's going from 0 up that way, right? So that could be 45 degrees, okay? But sometimes you don't just think about it in terms of 45 like that. You could also think about it in terms of this angle, right? So it would be, what is that, 360 minus 45, so 315, right? So you could also think of that in terms of a negative 315 degrees, right? So when you do a couple of these exercises, if it says, hey, this angle is 180, and you type in 180, and it goes the other way, it will be the opposing angle. It will just be a negative direction, okay? And this, Jeff is, I blame all these assignments on Jeff because he wrote them, but he's really tricky with a lot of them, right? But they're tricky, but they kind of make you think, and then next time you're doing something, you kind of recognize what's happening. But this will happen a lot where you get this angle, right? Or he'll say something like this, right? Oh, it's a 45-degree angle. Well, it's actually not really a 45-degree angle, right? It's a 315-degree angle, okay? So we've got our next line, and it's a relative, a relative input. So we're going to type at, in the x direction it's 1, 2, 3, in the y direction it's 0. Okay. In the book too, you will see under polar coordinates, it gives you the input, how you're going to enter it into AutoCAD. So it says at the distance at an angle of 45, right? Or whatever it's going to be. So here we're going to type at, in the x direction it's 0, in the y it's 2. And here we're going to type at, and in the x direction we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, negative 6, comma 0. Okay, and now we have this angle. Okay, and we're assuming, because it appears to be parallel, that it's 45, right? But it's actually, it's a negative. It's a negative angle, right? So we want to type at 1.41 at an angle of negative 45. Oop, what happened? It's not actually 45, right? It's not negative 45. It's going to be the 315, right? So I'm going to type undo. I'm going to type at, let's see, 1.41 at an angle of 315. Oh, what happened there? What did I forget? Negative 315, yes. It's so easy, right? Or you forget to put the at symbol and it shoots down from the origin. You're thinking, I don't know what happened, right? So at 1.41 at an angle of negative 315. Oh, I did it wrong. I was thinking of it wrong. It's going to be a positive 315 because I'm moving in that counterclockwise direction. Does that make sense? Okay. I know, you're looking at me like, what is happening, right? Right? There's about 18 different possibilities we can get this wrong, right? If I was just going to forget the at symbol, but we'll just do the 315. So we're going to do 1.41 at an angle of 1.41 at an angle of 315 degrees. Oh, I didn't initiate my line command. First error. At 1.41 at an angle of 315 degrees. Ooh.
It's the angle of 225 degrees, not 315. 315 goes all the way around.
You're right, it is 225, you're right. See, architects aren't good at math, right? Let's see, I'm totally messing this one up. Sorry. Negative 315 though. And you said 225, right? If it goes the other way. It is 315.
Or
Negative 315. Let's see. Let's see. 1.41. 1.41 at an angle of negative 315. No, it is negative. Negative 1.41. Sorry, I put it in the wrong direction. There we go. We're going to learn a much easier way to do this. There we go. 1.1. Yeah, there it is. 1.41 at an angle of 315. No. I'm totally messing it up. I'm confused now. They both have to be negative. Yep, at negative 1.41 at an angle of negative 315. And I got my at right. Finally, there we go. Okay, there we go. That one was confusing, right? Again, we'll blame Jeff. But you guys get the idea, right? And then we can finish up here, right? By there's no polar input here. It's just going to be a relative input at. It's going to be in the x direction. It's going to be 1, comma, -2. 1, 2. 0. Okay, now I'm not, okay, this will be the last one we're going to do this way, right? Line at x is 0, 0, comma, -2. There we go. Oh, I forgot to initiate my line command. Okay. At 0, comma, -2. And I forgot my line command again. Is this one ever going to be over? 0, comma, -2. There we go. Okay. So we've completed our little puzzle here. Okay. And that's polar coordinates. But by far and away, the easiest way, and likely 99.9% of the time, what you will do is just use your direct entry, right? I think that I probably very rarely use absolute input, right? Unless I get a project that says the point of beginning is 10, 4, and you're like, okay, well, I specifically have to start at 10, -4. That would be the only time where I would use my absolute, dimensions from the origin, right? Just not very common. Polar coordinates, or sorry, absolute coordinates, a little bit more common. Okay, a little bit more common because you use them to create rectangles sometimes. And so I started a rectangle, and then I know that I want to create one that is 10 feet by 10 feet. So I have to use the @ symbol to create that rectangle, which we'll go over. Sometimes I want to create objects that are a certain distance from each other, right? So this rectangle starts here. This one is at a distance 10 feet from that one. So I will use my @ command, right, to create that. So polar coordinates will be used to create site plans. If you're a civil engineer, you'll be using them quite a bit, okay? But by far and away, again, the most common input you're going to be using is direct entry, right? And it just makes sense. So direct entry, direct coordinates, all right, is essentially point and shoot. Okay, so I initiate my line command, which I didn't forget this time. I click on my first point, or I can type 1, 1 if I want, 1, 1, enter, and I move in the direction I want to go, right? I can click, or I can just type a direction or a dimension. So in this case, it's 2. One thing I want to pay attention to, do you notice I don't have my ortho on, right? If I don't have my ortho on, then I could potentially get a line that's not straight. But, so that being said, I could potentially get a line that's not straight. That is if my snap doesn't engage as well, right? This snap right here you can see happening is, it looks like the nearest snap. What will snap to one of these little guys, this is called a point, is the node object snap. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to turn on my node. Okay, come back over to AutoCAD. Do you see how that node snapped right to the center of that? So a couple of ways I can get straight lines. Make sure my node object snap is turned on, right? Or just turn my ortho on, F8. Okay, it's turned off right now. You see that? F8, and it turns on. So I could just type 1, I've got 1, 2, 3, 3, enter, there it goes. And I move in the direction I want to go, 1, enter, 1, I go over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, enter, 2, enter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, enter. Now I didn't have to type -7 because when I moved my mouse in that direction, it gave AutoCAD the idea that I was moving in the negative direction and it just followed the mouse, right? So this is pretty easy because there's no positive negative, okay? So here I'm going to type 1, 2, 3, -3, or not -3, sorry, 3, because by moving my mouse in that direction, I have shown AutoCAD I want to go -3, so I just type 3 and it moves in that direction. Okay, so this is going to be the way by and far that you'll be drawing things, right? You'll open up a drawing, you will start where you want it to start, and then you'll just start drawing away. Okay, now so we've got absolute, relative, polar, direct entry coordinates. The final way that we are going to be inputting is dynamic input. Okay, so dynamic input here, I can click it on. I'm going to go back over to my file folder here and open up dynamic. Okay, we get another puzzle, right, essentially. But dynamic input is really kind of a it's really kind of a combination of most of the inputs, right? So we have we've got the direct input, we have polar input, and then the input for the dynamic input, which is at the cursor. So I initiate my line command, right? I'm going to start here, okay, click. Now I can type at, and when I type at, immediately, because my dynamic input is turned on, it knows that I want to create a relative input, and because I have sort of kind of created an angle here, do you see how it's sort of sensing that angle? See how it's changing? 30, 40, 50. I'm going to snap, and do you see how it kind of, I could type 1.41, which is that distance, right? But do you see how it's kind of sensing that? So it's saying 1.41 at an angle of 45 degrees. So I could type 1.41 and then I could hit enter because the 45 is there, or I could click, okay, and it will start that. It will create that. So this is kind of a combination of direct, polar, and absolute or relative all at the same time. Okay. I don't prefer it. I feel like it's kind of confusing, honestly, because when you're inputting, it's sort of like, for example, if I wanted to create, you know, a let's see, we're over 8, up 1, 2. If I wanted to create an absolute input, right, I could type 8, comma, and then it kind of takes me to, you know, my cursor changes a little bit, right? But when I move my mouse, it kind of bumped me out. Now I'm back to the 8, right, at the cursor, and it's locked that 8, and I can tab over now if it didn't bump me over where it's highlighted in blue, and I could type 2, right? Well, but then my why it did that was because my cursor was kind of angled at the same time I did that. So when I kind of finished it, it went into polar and gave me an angle, right? So I feel like it's a little bit temperamental. I don't mind that. I don't mind it when I'm using direct entry and I can input at the command line there, but I kind of feel like it's a little bit temperamental. It's just essentially it, right? So you can use it if you want, but not my favorite. Does anybody like direct input or dynamic so far? Haven't decided yet, maybe? Okay. All right. Okay. Any questions so far? I'll kind of maybe stop there.
Can you come back quickly, like on a direct input?
Do the direct input again? Yeah, let's do that again. The direct coordinate is going to be essentially, let's do this again. I'm going to delete these things. I initiate the line command, right? I can click or input a coordinate to begin. Click. Let me turn my this off. I move in the direction I want to go, and I just type a distance. So 1, 2, 3, 3, enter. Move in the direction I want to go, 1, enter. Move in the direction I want to go, 4, enter. Move in the direction I want to go, 2. Okay, so it's just essentially moving in the direction you want to go and typing a dimension. Yep. Okay, any other questions? That's kind of a lot for today, so we'll end there. Like I said, I'll post your assignment just after this class, but essentially you're just going to have to create a couple of these little objects, right? So it'll tell you type in 1, 1, then hit enter. Type at 6, 0, hit enter, right? So you will just create a few of these. The way that I want these submitted is I want them separate files. So when you start your assignment, right, you will, let me close out of all of these and I'll show you how you're going to start your assignment. We have a lot of files open, didn't we? Okay, so you go, you want to start your assignment, you open up AutoCAD. The first thing that you're going to do is you're just going to click on Start Drawing, click, okay, and by doing that it opens up a blank drawing, And right now with these exercises we're doing today, they're all in decimal. So that would be kind of the first thing that I would just want to check and make sure that I'm in decimal before I start drawing. So I look down here and I see, yes, I'm in decimal. Another way I would check that is I would type units at the command line and hit enter. And we are in decimal. Okay, great. The next thing I would do is save this file. So file, save. And you're going to want to give it, I'm going to go to my desktop, you're going to want to give it the same name as the actual exercise. So this one is Relative Coordinates Tutorial 2. Okay, create that file, give it that name, and then to create the drawing. Okay, so I would call this, you know, whatever that was, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then I would come in and I would draw however, you know, whatever I need to draw, whatever it says, end it, finish, save, close, right? Finished, done with one, close it, save it. We're done with that part. Okay, for the next exercise, you're going to do the same thing. Okay, you're going to start a brand new drawing, save it, give it the exact same name as the tutorial name that you're doing, create one drawing in there, close it, save it, and that's it. Yep.
Where do we save it to?
So as far as saving them personally for you, right, my best suggestion is just in the same place on your computer every time. Maybe the real question you're asking is, where do we turn them in?
No.
No? Just where you save them?
Yeah.
Okay. So on your personal computer, or if you're here, if you want to save your items here, at school you can save them on your T drive. Okay? So if you're working here, you can save them on your T drive. They're private. Nobody else can access them. But the problem with that is that you will have a hard time accessing them from home. So your T drive is, generally speaking, not accessible from home. Okay? If you want them at home, you'll have to email them to yourself, or use Google Drive or a flash drive to take them with you. Okay? If you're at home, I would just create a folder on your desktop or wherever you save your files, you know, AutoCAD homework, and then just save everything that you do for this class in that same folder. Okay? You're going to turn all of these in on Canvas. So when you turn your assignment in on Canvas, you'll have 5 files that you turn in, 5 drawing files. Okay? They'll be DWG files, and you'll turn every single one in. That makes sense to everybody?
You don't need our name on the file name?
No.
It'll just come through.
Yeah, it's when it's turned in on under your assignment on Canvas, I know it's yours. Yeah. Okay. If you have any questions, just email me. I'll post, just give me like 15 minutes or so, and I'll post that assignment for you to work on. I remember Monday's Labor Day, right? No school. I know. Okay. I'll get this assignment posted. Actually, let me stop this.